Today is Friday, June 21st, and this is William Michael of the Classical Liberal Arts Academy. Today I'd like to talk about extracurricular activities for homeschool students, really for homeschool families, because I think that the question of extracurricular activities and things that kids should do is really misunderstood in modern society because of false ideas about college admission and what colleges are looking for. And I'd like to clear up some of these issues and also make some positive suggestions based on my own experience. Raising 10 kids, 7 of whom are boys, and seeing them go on to success both in college and career. When I was a kid, I went to public schools, and I grew up in central New Jersey, in suburban central New Jersey. I grew up in a working class family, and there were really two things to do when I was a kid. You go to school and you play sports, and that's all that I did. You go to school and you play sports. And then when you get into high school, you have to get decent grades in order to play sports. So school becomes important only because you need to qualify academically to play sports. And if you get in trouble in school, you get detention, you stay after school, you miss practice, and you end up getting into trouble with your coach. And so the motivation, the only motivation that I had to study at all or to behave in school was the fear of getting in trouble with my coaches. But that's all that I did. It was go to school, do the bare minimum of what was required to avoid getting into trouble, and then play sports. And that's really all that I paid attention to. And I spent thousands of hours playing sports when I was a kid, playing youth recreational sports from the time I was 5 years old. Baseball, basketball, wrestling, and then getting into high school and playing baseball and football, and not just playing on teams, but practicing, not just practicing, but drilling at home, going to camps, going to the batting cages, shooting for just endless hours in basketball, practicing wrestling, training, just so much activity, so much time spent on sports, and especially in baseball. Most of all, in baseball, I was a pitcher and a catcher. So I was either pitching, or when I wasn't pitching, I was catching. And they're two of the most, skill heavy positions on the team. And I was just constantly training, constantly at batting cages, constantly at camps, working on pitches, working on hitting, working on catching and technique and all kinds of strategy and things for the games, and just so much time spent on sports as a kid. And now as an adult, when I look back, I see it as just such a waste of time. And what I'd like to say is that when it comes to extracurricular activities, I think that skill sports are a waste of time. And by skill sports, I mean football, basketball, baseball, team sports, sports where there's a lot of strategy, a lot of technical skill required, and especially sports that end with our school years. Baseball, for example, you play until you're 17 or 18 years old. Whether it's for school or for like a recreational league. And we had a Babe Ruth baseball league that went on until 17, and then there was a AAA BA team where I lived that played until 18. But then, you either go to college and play or you're done. And then even if you do go to college, you play 4 years in college, and then, either you go pro, which hardly anyone does, or you're done. And so these skill sports, which kids are spending so much time on, are almost exclusively limited to school activities. And then once you're out of school, all of that is over. Now, as a man, you could join a men's basketball league or a men's flag football team or a men's softball. Some places even have men's baseball leagues. But still, all of that time spent developing those sports skills is really a waste of time. And so when I became a father and started to have boys, I thought about it for a little bit, whether I would want to get them into sports. And then I decided that I didn't want them to do what I did. I didn't want to promote skill sports among my kids. I wanted them to use their time much better and not get wrapped up all into that. It's also a great drain on the family. I remember my mother, taking me alone. I had two sisters and I was the only boy. But my mother driving me around to games and practices and camps, it was like a part-time job for her. And when I think back to how much time it took from her, how much financial strain a lot of those activities put on my parents, how much my sisters were just dragged around to all of my sporting events, it just wasn't good for anyone but me. And in the end, it wasn't good for me either. So again, when I had my own kids, I had no interest in getting them into organized skill sports. I had other ideas of what would be more helpful. And as an adult, what I find is that time that I spent learning about my body, time that I spent learning about fitness, lifting weights, running, exercising, things like that, that's really what is valuable. That's really what is valuable. And so with my kids, when my oldest son was about 13 or 14 years old, I began investing in exercise equipment for our family. And this is what I would really recommend to homeschooling families. If you're going to give your children some physical activity to do, extracurricular activity, don't think that getting into skill sports, getting into team sports, recreational leagues, and so on, don't think that that's the only option. There are other options that I think are much better. And the reason why I think they're better is because, first of all, the kids can participate in them as much as they want. They're always available, and if the kids enjoy them, they can do them all the time. And secondly, whatever the kids learn through these activities, they can take with them into adulthood and enjoy for the rest of their lives, and it's actually beneficial to them. So what I did when my oldest son was around 13 years old was I cleared out the garage, and I decided to dedicate the garage to exercise equipment. And the first thing I did, I spent a couple $100 and I just bought a weight bench and weight set, just a basic set so they could do, bench press, squats, arm curls, just the basic, 7 or 8 core weightlifting exercises. And I started going for walks and for runs. And then I would invite the kids to join me on walks and runs. And so I introduced the kids to weightlifting and running, and encourage them, to compete against themselves. I explained that what's cool about weightlifting is you don't need a team. You don't need other teams. You don't need to travel anywhere. You don't need any contests. You compete against yourself. And so I put a whiteboard up in the garage, and I said, as you go through these different exercises, just record, you record the weights you work with, how many reps you can do, and so on. And just constantly compete with yourself, constantly work on increasing the weight, increasing the reps, and you've got a constant competition to engage against yourself. So you're always competing against yesterday and trying to do better. And the same thing with running. You go out for a run, you measure out a mile course or a 3 mile course, a 5 mile course, even a 10-mile course, and you can do all that with Google Maps now, which is very easy. But measure out a course, and then every month, every couple of months, run that course as fast as you can, and try to beat your time. Compete against yourself. Keep track of your times, and see if you can get better and better. And so there's competition and there's a challenge, and you put your scores and your weights up on the board and constantly try to beat yourself. And so my son Jonathan, when he was 13, he wasn't interested in running too much. He wasn't a cardio guy, but he got very interested in weightlifting. And after a few months, I just taught him basic techniques, basic workouts. Then he started to take interest in it himself. He started to read some books on weightlifting, started to get into it a little bit more. And by the time he was 15 or 16, he would study during the day as a homeschool student, get finished around 4 o'clock, and then he would work out and train from 4 o'clock, sometimes until 10 or 11 o'clock at night. And got himself to such a high, I can show you pictures of the level of fitness that he attained, but he basically got himself to a point where he could have been a professional bodybuilder. He was gifted naturally, he was motivated, he was intelligent, he was competitive and eager to challenge himself. And what was good about it was, as a homeschool student, it became something that he could do all the time, that was good for him, that was healthy, that was interesting to him, kept him out of trouble, kept him off all the internet, YouTube, video games. He was interested in weightlifting. It was always accessible to him. It didn't really cost us much. The equipment cost a couple $100 to get started at home. And that was it. He had something to pursue every day as much as he wanted to, and he loved it. And it was good for him. It taught him strength. There's all kinds of moral lessons to be learned through weight training and fitness. And then my daughter, Elizabeth, who was the second child, she got into it with him. And so she started exercising, lifting weights, but she was also more interested in running. So she started running and getting into more cardio fitness. And then my younger kids just kept following them. So my entire family has been interested in fitness ever since I first bought a simple weight set. I think I bought it from Sears for like $300 or $400. Ever since I bought that first weight set and dedicated the garage to weightlifting, my whole family, all my children, have been interested in weightlifting and running. So, in our family, the kids do their schoolwork, and then at 4 o'clock, they wrap up and they get to their exercise, and they do all different things. Some of them lift weights, some of them go running, some of them get on their bikes and go for rides. And I'm talking like long-distance rides for fitness. Now, what's cool as a homeschool family with kids into fitness is that, like I said, you're not dependent on all these other groups and teams. There's no traveling, all this craziness. They can do it as much as they want every day. It's relatively inexpensive. Even for us, every holiday, like every Christmas, I'll add something to the weightlifting equipment, get some more weight, get a new bar, get some new piece of equipment. And it's just really all that I do for them in terms of family gifts is just buy them recreational fitness equipment, and that's what they love. My wife, when she wants to get the kids a treat, she just buys them protein powder or something for their training. I get them a pair of new running shoes, some new workout clothes, things like that. So it's just a good culture for the kids to develop when they're at home. And wherever they go, whatever they do, all the benefits of their fitness training they bring with them. So it's not something that when you finish school, you just stop. Like for me, when I finished high school, I had collected a bunch of injuries over the last year or two of my high school years, playing football and breaking a shoulder. I finally decided that I didn't want to continue with sports. I was also going through my conversion experience at that time. But all of that training just was lost. Countless hours, thousands of dollars, years and years of sports. It was just all over. I was never going to go pitch again, use all the knowledge and skill I had developed in pitching. I was never going to be a catcher anywhere. I was never going to go and hit, curveballs and splitters and all of this difficult work that takes all of this skill training. I was never going to do any of that ever again. So all of that time to develop those skills was just a waste of my time. Whereas if I would have been developing other skills and learning other things like running and training and lifting weights and becoming skilled, that all of that would have gone with me into adult life. And so I did get into fitness in college, lifting and running, but I really wasn't into that in high school. I was just into the skill sports. And the skill sport training, it just goes on forever. It will never end. I see videos on social media of all of this sports skill training, and it's just so ridiculously useless. It goes to such extremes, like parents signing kids up to camps to learn all of this technical skill in these sports. That is all useless as soon as these school sports come to an end. But fitness we take with us into adult life, and we could say that about some sports too. For example, swimming would be valuable because you can continue training in swimming as an adult at a health club. Playing golf would be helpful because you can continue playing golf your whole life. So there are some things that you can see that they turn into recreational activities. They turn into leisure activities in adulthood, and others are just completely artificial and restricted to school year activities, and then they stop. And I think that those activities are a waste of time. Now, I'm not denying that they're fun. I mean, I loved playing sports. I loved the friendships that I developed through sports. I loved the competition. I loved, all of that, the whole culture of the sports. I loved it. But as I said, once I hit 18, 19 years old, it was all over. And when I think back and think of all the stress it put on my parents, I just don't think it's prudent to have done all that. And I definitely look back with regret because I think it was selfish and irresponsible. But fitness and certain activities, certain sports that can be continued as leisure activities through adulthood. We could say something like recreational basketball. You can go to a health club and play pickup basketball to stay in shape. So there are some things that are valuable, and then there are other things that are just really entirely scholastic, and in the sense that when you're done with your schooling, those activities disappear. And those things, I don't think it's smart to get the kids wrapped up in them because they really don't help anything. But as I said, what I did was when my oldest was around 13, I just cleared out the garage and invested in some exercise equipment. And then I just started working out with him just to show him how to do things and get him started. And, he was interested in it, got into it, and then it just became like contagious for the rest of the family. Then when the kids got older and, my ability to provide them with the equipment that they needed to keep challenging themselves and keep growing, it came to an end where, I just couldn't provide them with the level of equipment that they needed as they developed. And so we just got a gym membership for the family, a health club membership for the family. And they started to go there. My wife would just, at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, she would just drive to the health club and bring any kids who wanted to go to the health club, and they'd go work out, lift weights, swim, run, whatever they wanted to do. And we just used the health club as our daily recreational activity for the kids. And then once the kids got older, got their driver's licenses and things like that, the gym became their hangout. They would just get in their car, go to the gym, work out. My son Jonathan ended up working at the gym. I think my younger son David also ended up working at the gym. And that became their culture, So it all started with just some simple home gym equipment in the garage, but it provided them with really an endless supply of healthy and life-strengthening activity while they were homeschooling. And then for my kids, um, they all decided to pursue military careers, and again, they just brought all of that with them to the next level. Like for my kids, going to basic training is nothing. I mean, my kids train harder at home than they need to for basic training. So they just go and breeze through Army basic training. And then they've got a whole career open to them. My son Jonathan, for example, just to give you a specific, my son Jonathan is 24, just finished college, graduated ROTC cadet, starting his officer career right now. Just scored a 598 on the Army fitness test. The perfect score is a 600. Jonathan scored a 598, so I mean almost a perfect score on the fitness test. So if you think about military careers and you think about the obstacle of physical fitness, if that obstacle is taken away, there's really no limit, no downside to the military career. And that's where my kids have ended up, because getting into the military and succeeding in the military for my kid is just easy. It's easy because they love fitness, they love training, and they push themselves harder Monday to Friday than they ever, they ever have to for a scheduled test or anything like that. And the testing is part of the regular military training, whether they're in ROTC or the reserves. The biggest challenge is just making sure you stay in shape and passing your fitness tests. So their interest in fitness and my promotion of fitness as an activity, and not just promotion of it with words, but putting money on the table and providing them with the equipment to do it, the supplies to do it, gym memberships, things like that, has created, I think, a really healthy, and literally a really healthy environment in our family when it comes to extracurricular activity, leisure activity, and so on. Now that my kids are going into adulthood, exercise is just sort of a normal part of their daily routine. My daughter just had an internship in Washington, D.C., and the first thing she did when she got to Washington, D.C., she didn't go and tour the buildings. She didn't go and explore Washington, D.C. She went and found a gym. That was the first thing she did. She found a gym in the center of Washington, D.C., and as soon as she established a good gym, that was it. She was. It was as if she had made herself at home. It just creates a healthy leisure activity for the kids and provides order and discipline for their life. Jonathan, when he was in college, worked out at the student recreation center, and then ended up getting into a local boxing gym and started boxing. So there's just interesting opportunities for the kids that they can get into once they develop strength and fitness, and it's good for them. It's always kept them out of trouble. It's always kept them away from alcohol and drugs. And I was the same way. I was never interested in alcohol or drugs of any kind when I was a teenager or in college, because I wanted to be healthy. I was concerned about fitness and health. Never ever, even though my friends did things and I hung out with my friends, I never got into drinking, never was into smoking. Drank a couple times in college, but that ended quickly. Never drank or anything like that in high school. And the reason why, it wasn't moral. It wasn't that I thought it was sinful and didn't want to do it. It was because I was concerned about my physical health. I was concerned about my cardio fitness. That's why I didn't want to smoke. I didn't want to have to run with junk in my lungs. I wanted to keep myself healthy and clean. And so just a desire for fitness kept me away from bad habits. I ate healthy because I didn't want my weight training and fitness to be wasted and be, put on weight or be unhealthy because I chose to eat bad food. So the weightlifting and exercise also promoted healthy eating. It also kept me away from bad habits. And the same is true of my kids. They were always kept away from things, even today. Like my son, Jonathan, I mean, he might go out with some of his buddies on a weekend night, but he's not interested in drinking, not interested in smoking, and marijuana smoking is like universal today among college age kids. Never wanted to do any of that because he wanted to be healthy. He was concerned about fitness. And so rather than talking about drugs and alcohol as some kind of moral issue, if we teach our kids to be healthy and our kids actually experience what it feels like to be healthy, it's not going to take long. If they do ever get into alcohol or even experiment with drugs, it's not going to take them long to feel how terrible it is in their life and make a decision to go against it, not for some abstract moral reason, but because they want to be healthy. And I think that's a much more realistic solution for all the alcohol and drug problems. I have kids who come home from college complaining about the fact that everybody smokes pot and everybody's drinking. They're also not exercising, and that's, I think, really part of the problem. And I speak from my own experience. My desire to be healthy and fit is what kept me away from alcohol and drugs, even smoking. I never even touched a cigarette as a kid. And again, not because I was a good moral kid. I wasn't. It was just because I wanted to be healthy for the sake of fitness. So we've never had to deal with any of those things because my kids are zealous for their own fitness. I mean, my kids, for example, if my kids do some work for me and I give them some money, they want to buy food. That's what they want to buy. They get $50 and they're excited to go with my wife to the grocery store the next time she goes, and they buy themselves some chicken breast and protein shakes, and they buy themselves a few gallons of milk. They want to buy healthy food. That's what they're interested in buying for themselves, because they're trying to train and they want trying to get more protein and this and that. And so if I give them money, that money goes to the grocery store for those kids. If I want to get the kids a gift, stocking stuffer at Christmas, protein bars, protein shake, that's the kind of stuff they're interested in because they're concerned with their fitness. It's just a good, healthy culture that develops. And so if we think about human beings as this composite body and soul, through their education, through the sacramental life in the church, through catechesis, we provide for their souls, but also for virtue. We think about things like fortitude, and fortitude is developed, by these exercises, by this constant self-challenging, working through injuries, learning to not be afraid of injuries, and so on. Fortitude is cultivated through these things. We think about prudence and temperance. These virtues are cultivated through fitness and, regulating your diet and things like that, understanding that we don't just eat what tastes good, or we don't just do what feels good, but we make decisions, that are based on outcomes. And St. Paul explains this when he talks about athletes, how they discipline themselves, they exercise and deny themselves many things for the sake of their athletic training, and he says that's that's good. Athletics teaches us natural virtue, and he urges Christians to build on that. So you understand the concept from your athletic experience, or from observing the lives of athletes and how they deny themselves foods and how they train themselves and discipline themselves. You see that they're willing to do that in order to win their athletic competitions. But we have to realize that we have an everlasting crown to win, sort of an everlasting competition. And if our reward is so infinitely superior to that of earthly athletes, how much more should we be disciplining ourselves and training for the sake of that heavenly reward? And so even that concept of this Christian discipline, this Christian asceticism, that has to be learned somewhere. We have to learn to start to think about that, or even to be able to understand that. And if we don't learn like that discipline of the athlete, I don't think we can really understand the benefit of ascetic living. And if we go back into the ancient world, like Plato and Aristotle, they taught that education, early education, should focus on gymnastics, which meant physical training, and music. So for them, like the way that you teach these concepts, the way that you introduce children to the mental disciplines that allow them then to go on and pursue higher things like philosophical studies or military action or political careers and so on. You cultivate that by laying the foundation through athletic activity. And for the ancient Greeks, that just meant training in the gymnasia. So it was athletic training. It wasn't a traveling all-star team. It wasn't club soccer, things like that. It wasn't skill sports and things. The Olympic sports, if you look back to the original Greek Olympic sports, they were simply military skills that were useful in adult life. So, for example, if you think about the ancient soldier, the equipment he had sword fighting, physical combat, hand-to-hand combat, throwing a javelin, running, climbing, and so on. Those were the Olympic activities. So because we need to throw a javelin in military service, we have a contest where we throw the javelin to see who can throw it the farthest to promote javelin training. And because we have to fight hand-to-hand combat in military battles, we have hand-to-hand combat as an Olympic sport. We have wrestling, boxing, and there was some other more like modern mixed martial arts type stuff in the ancient Olympic Games. And then we've got running and jumping and all these traditional track and field events that were really military exercises that were engaged in for the sake of physical training and fitness and the development of a competitive spirit, of discipline, and of virtue. So even the principle there in the Olympic Games was it's good to practice things that have some adult application and use, rather than some entirely artificial recreational sports that are useless in adulthood. Now I know some will say, "Oh, but there are moral lessons to learn. You can learn about teamwork and learn about this." And yeah, that's true, but those things can also be learned in more natural settings, like just working. Getting a job, you can learn about teamwork. Working in your family, you can learn about. You don't need to join a baseball league to learn about teamwork. So I think that the moral lessons of the high skill sports, the team sports, I think they're exaggerated, and I think they can be learned through better means. But anyway, that's when it comes to extracurricular activities for homeschool kids. I think weight training and exercise is really a great option. Now, for girls, it's a little different because the whole idea of like bulking up and getting stronger, obviously, that's not very attractive for girls. And my daughter Elizabeth, like I said, she was interested in weightlifting really because Jonathan was so extremely interested in weightlifting. But eventually, she ended up just focusing on fitness and running and things like that. And she actually joined the military as well as a combat medic. And she's been able to do all kinds of amazing things because of her extraordinary physical fitness. But with my younger daughter, I really didn't want to promote weightlifting and things like that. So we ended up, when she was 7 years old, we got her into dancing, into ballet, and that's just been awesome. I mean, she is so physically fit and strong and coordinated and graceful and flexible as a 9-year-old girl, all because of ballet. I would recommend something like that for girls, dance rather than weightlifting, fitness type stuff. So my point, the principle that I'd like to share with respect to sports and fitness for homeschool kids is, think about this principle of Olympic activities, that it's worth investing in activities that develop skills that are useful in adult life and that promote just general physical fitness. Think of that idea of the Olympic sports, and when you're considering extracurricular activities for your kids, I think you need to ask yourself about whether the skills learned, whether the things learned will be useful for them when they're adults. Getting into running, for example, becoming good at running, becoming comfortable running, will lead kids to run as adults and make that a part of their adult culture. I go out and either walk or run because I was doing that when I was a teenager, and I like running. I know how to run. I know what it feels like to run. I know how to train. I know how hard I can push myself. I know how to deal with injuries and things like that. And really, running and cardio training, long distance type stuff, it's just good mentally too. It's good for me to go out and run. My kids will sometimes joke because I can get on a treadmill and just run nonstop for an hour. And sometimes my kids joke because they may not like cardio fitness as much as weight training. They'll joke about it, like, how can you do that? Like, it's so boring. And yet at this point in my life, with all the stress of business and just all the day-to-day stress of work and things like that, to get on a treadmill and just cruise mentally for an hour is very, very comforting and helpful in the day, to relieve stress, to just let my mind relax and wander a bit as I just get into a routine, jogging and just stay at it. And it's just that routine of jogging just becomes very comforting. And so it's very good. Even when I learned about fitness training in the military, not when I was not in the military, but I learned about the principles and sort of the purposes of fitness training. One of the major purposes of all of the training, all of the running and exercising of the troops is to relieve stress, just to get their minds off of the stressful things not in their control in life and allow them to focus on something else for an hour or two a day, just to break that stress and help them to decompress mentally. So it's just good for us. And I think that if homeschool families would invest in fitness equipment at home, gym memberships, when it became, especially if you have multiple kids, you can get a family membership at a gym. And, the kids then have access to everything at the gym, which is great. The swimming pools, basketball courts, weightlifting rooms, aerobics classes, racquetball courts. There's usually all these things. Getting a family membership at a health club and having mom just drive the van to the health club at 4:00 in the afternoon. Let the kids have an hour or two at the club. My wife usually will bring a tablet with her and just work on some stuff while she sits by the pool or hangs out while the kids work out. Our health club has an outside pool as well, so the kids can go swimming out in the sun. My wife will sit on a sun chair and answer emails or something like that. So she just makes it a nice time for herself to get out, get a little bit of exercise, get some sun, get some fresh air, and let the kids get some exercise, have some fun. And it's just a controlled, simple, easy to budget activity for the family. And the different kids with their different interests can find different activities to do. And it's something they can continue their whole life. They can go to the health club when they're 40 years old. And so introducing them to that, letting that be, our outlet in terms of daily activity has been really good to the kids. Now, if the kids get into running and things like that, you also have options to participate in, like local 5K races and stuff like that, which is fun. Our kids do that. You can just go online, find out when and where there are races in your area, and the kids can just get signed up and go compete in a 5K race and run it as fast as they can and get their score. My kids can usually win some medals and things like that. And that's all the motivation that they need. That's all the competition that they need. It's fun. And then, they register for another race and they know what their time was in the previous race or in the same race the previous year, and they've got motivation to try to beat their time. We don't need this like constant traveling all-star team, traveling sports team, the games. I mean, my freshman year of baseball, I think I played 42 games. Think about how much time that was, 3-4 hour games, 42 games between high school and traveling teams and all this kind of stuff. And my parents were at those games. My dad wasn't at all the games, but my mom was at all the games. My grandparents were at games. My sisters got dragged around to all those games. Just so much time, really, for a desire for competition that's never going to be satisfied. And that's why it needs to be tempered at the beginning, because it's never going to be satisfied. And we need to learn to control that, rather than try to satisfy it. So when it comes to these activities, I recommend that homeschool parents invest in some home gym equipment. Like even at our house, we've got a bench set. We've got all the bars for lifting weights. We've probably got 400 pounds worth of weight for the kids, which is all that they ever need for home exercise. When they start to get up into higher weights, I tell them, it's time for you to start working out at the gym, because working out in a home gym is really not appropriate when you can squat 400 pounds. You need to go to the gym, and that's what they usually do. By the time they hit puberty, get to like 16 years old, their body starts to thicken up. They start to produce muscle. It's time for you to start going to the gym. But until then, 13, 14, 15, it's good for them to get started and learn at home with lighter weights, simple equipment. So we've got a bench press set. We've got a squat rack in the house. They've got, like I said, probably 400 pounds of weights. And that's it. A couple bars, barbells, some dumbbells, and that's it. They get into jumping rope, so there's an area, some space for them to jump rope, things like that. But it doesn't take much money. A few $100 can get you maybe, let's say $1,000. If you spend $1,000, you can probably get everything you'll ever need as far as weightlifting goes. And then just, when holidays come around, when birthdays come around, you buy a new pair of running shoes, some exercise clothes, things like that. If the kids, the kids want a reward, if they get into fitness, rewards will just be food. My wife will just go out and buy the kids some meat, because we eat pretty light. So just getting some extra meat, eggs in the house. She'll hard boil a bunch of eggs for the kids and just let them snack to get some protein. They become content with those things. A container of protein powder. They just become content. It's easy to get gifts. It's easy to reward them with things. And like I said before, they just have no interest in unhealthy culture. They have no interest in sitting around endlessly playing video games or being on computers. They have a desire to get up and go and do stuff. So you can solve or avoid lots of modern problems by just promoting physical fitness among the kids. And that doesn't need to be pursued through soccer teams and baseball teams and basketball teams and AAU teams and all this kind of stuff. That's really not necessary to solve the problem. So my advice, as one who grew up playing sports and who has trained kids who went on to become soldiers and military officers now, Jonathan's probably going to be an Army Ranger within the next year or two, and some of my other kids are already on pace for similar things. I can say that the kids don't need that stuff. What's better for them is to cultivate a culture and habit of just physical training, cardio exercise, as simple as going for walks. I mean, as parents, you're not going to compete with the kids once they get into it. But like, I go for a walk every day, and so I'll go walk 5 miles. My kids will see me get out from my walk, and I'll have my phone and my headphones, and I'll get out on the road and go for a brisk walk. Sometimes I jog. I do about 5 miles a day. And for me, it's just a time to, like I said, decompress, get some exercise, be healthy, get some fresh air and sunlight. And once I'm out there, my kids want to get out there. And so they get out there on their bikes or they're running. They go running while I walk. And I always say, dads who exercise have kids who exercise. And it just eliminates a lot of the problems of modern culture. But I think parents have to take leadership of it. And like I said, when I first introduced it to my kids, it was my first son, Jonathan. I just started working out with him and showing him things and letting him work out. We were kind of like workout partners. And then really, as soon as he started to take it up for himself, I was not interested in weight training. But as soon as he started to get into it himself, I just stepped back and left him to do it. And then by that time, he had other brothers and sisters getting involved. But I think parents have to initiate it. Parents have to create the culture. Parents have to invest the money to provide the supplies and whatever, gym memberships as they're needed, and just let that become the family's extracurricular activity. I also have a treadmill in the house for myself. As an adult, I'm often stuck exercising when I have time. So I bought myself a treadmill, bought myself a rowing machine, and that's really all I need. I'll go to the gym occasionally, usually just to encourage the kids and spend some time with the kids. But that's usually my wife's thing. But I'll get out on the road for some walking and running. I'll exercise on the treadmill. If I've got to read something or if I've got some task to do on a computer that can be done while I walk, I do it on the treadmill. And I just keep myself active. And the kids see that. The kids are motivated by that. The kids are always asking me, "What'd you do today, Dad? How far did you walk today? How far did you run today? How much time did you put on the treadmill today? What are you doing on the rowing machine?" The kids are always curious, and it develops, a relationship between us that's beneficial for them. And I think it's an easy way to lead kids away from bad habits, provide them with extracurricular activity, give them stuff to do, help them to avoid becoming these weak, awkward, weird homeschool kids that don't do anything. Give them opportunities to build up their strength and courage and self-confidence. I think it's a good thing for homeschool parents to invest in, and I'd recommend it. So if you need any advice, or if you'd like to get into it and would like some recommendations, like I said, you don't need any fancy stuff. If there's a Sears where you are, Sears usually has like good basic home gym equipment. You don't need anything fancy. Once you get to bars and weights, it's pretty standard. Olympic bars, Olympic weights. They're a little pricey, but you don't need that much. Your kids are not going to be lifting 800 pounds. You can usually buy a weight set. They come, I think it's like 330 pounds as a basic weight set. It'll probably cost a couple $100. But that's it. You don't need to keep buying weight. And like I said, if you have kids that take it up and they get into it and they're getting to a point where 300 pounds isn't enough, you just take those kids to the gym where the weights are limitless. So 300-pound weight set, a bench, some barbells and dumbbells, and you've got everything the kids will need. An area where you can lay an exercise mat for them to do sit-ups and push-ups and things like that. Again, everything they need. And then as far as exercise, just by getting out, by mom and dad getting out, going for walks, maybe a jog if you're really motivated, you'll get the kids out. You'll get them, you take them out on bikes, let them ride rollerblades or whatever while you go for your walk, and and they'll get into that. I actually learned that from a Christian father that I knew growing up. There was a man when I lived in New Jersey. There was a Christian man who was just an incredible athlete. He was a carpenter, full-time carpenter by trade, but he used to train, and he was just, a physical specimen. I used to joke that when I was with that guy, I felt like a little girl. He was just such a fit, healthy, strong man. And where we lived was actually on his running path where he trained every day. And he would come by in the afternoon running, and he'd always have his boys in tow. He'd have kids on bikes, rollerblades, whatever they had, and he'd be running, and all the boys would be coming behind him, and they would just ride and follow him or get on rollerblades and try to keep up with him. And they ended up becoming college level, track and field athletes. One of his sons, might have even set records at the Naval Academy running. But they learned that from dad. It comes from dad, introducing them to it. And just getting the kids out on the road, getting the kids out walking through the neighborhood, jogging, riding their bikes, riding rollerblades. And then as they get older, transitioning from the rollerblades and from the bike to just running. That's sort of how that develops. But it starts with mom and dad, and it's something mom and dad can participate in. And my wife does the same thing. If she's got some time with the kids, she'll drive them over to the park. She'll go out on the trail and walk through the park and let them, ride their bikes, rollerblades, stuff like that. And so, that's how we get them started with that. And then it slowly transitions into running. And then being an 18-year-old who can run allows you to easily move into the military and have no problem with basic training and fitness tests and things. So there's an easy way to introduce the kids to that. Parents don't have to be fitness experts. You don't have to be, professional athletes. You just have to help the kids get started, supply what they need, and then they have free time and lots of energy that we as parents don't have, and they can just turn that free time and energy into weightlifting and exercise. Another thing is just, if you've got a driveway or even a street out front by the house, you're just sticking a basketball net out there, letting the kids shoot baskets, go outside, shoot baskets with the kids. That's always a fun, relaxing activity. And it can be useful, by just learning basic skills in basketball. You can always find a pickup game, go to the gym and find a pickup game, shoot around. It's just a nice thing to do. I like to go out and just shoot baskets with my kids. We'll just go out and stand around the basketball court, shoot baskets for a little while together, talk, things like that. It's a nice leisure activity to get outside and do things. So activities like that, activities that can be continued into adulthood, where you can learn some basic skills, develop some disciplines, get some equipment, get familiar with the culture, and then enjoy that as you move into adulthood, and keep it with you as you go through college, career, and so on. I think that's the best use of extracurricular time for the kids growing up. Now, again, like I said, my youngest daughter, we invested in her with dance because she was interested in dance, and it's turned out to be just the perfect solution for her. And I'm sure that if you had, individual kids that became really motivated and interested in a certain thing, it might be worth, letting them do that. If you had a kid who was really interested in martial arts, for example, it might be worth, investing in him being able to go to a good martial arts school in the area, but only if the kids take it seriously. It's not worth the money. This like participation activity is really no one benefits from that. The teams that they join don't benefit when the kids aren't motivated. The coaches don't benefit when the kids aren't motivated. The kids don't benefit when they're not motivated. You don't benefit when they're not motivated. There's no point trying to force kids into expensive activities. There's just no benefit. But if you've got a kid who is motivated, you've got a kid who, loves wrestling or loves, jiu-jitsu and wants to get into it, or loves dance and wants to, and is willing to practice and train, and when the coach or teacher gives them instructions, they do them. When you see signs like that, it might be worth pursuing some skill activities, and those activities are things that, again, can be continued into adulthood. So that's why the investment during youth in those things is not a waste. Whereas, like I said, the skill sports, baseball, basketball, football, soccer, lacrosse, things like that, they just don't carry over into adult life, and I think that's a waste of time. And again, just to qualify this, I love those sports. I played those sports every day as a kid. I understand how much fun they can be. I understand how much kids can enjoy them. But what I'm saying is it's a lot of time and energy and money invested in developing skills that we don't take with us into any adult activities. And I just don't think it's prudent for all of that time and all of that energy and all of that training to develop skills that end when those scholastic sports end. I just don't think that that's a prudent use of that money and time and energy. Because we could develop things that we can take with us into adulthood. We can take them to college. We can take them into business. We can take them into the military, take them into a suburb where we live, take them into our professional lives, and benefit from them. And to cultivate them while we're young and then bring them with us into adulthood, I think that's a good thing. And those are activities, that's a principle, I would say, that allows us to decide, what's a good idea and what's a bad idea. Can we bring this with us? Is this something that we can use throughout our lives, or is this something that's going to end in 5 years, and all of this time spent is just going to be time wasted in a couple of years? So anyway, it's not it's not some real criticism of those activities. It's just a choice between something good and something better, something temporary and something permanent. I think that there's a case to be made for what's more useful, what's more permanent in our lives. And I don't think the kids will demand those other things. I think they can find contentment in fitness and training. So anyway, I wanted to share that because this question of extracurricular activities comes up a lot. And, when we talk about college sports and scholarships and things, like a lot of this talk is just nonsense. The idea that in order to get a scholarship, you need to be a high school athlete, it's just stupid. There are academic scholarships, there are ROTC scholarships. There's financial aid is available for college. I mean, like paying for college is really not a problem. It's exaggerated. I don't understand why people make such a big deal of it. I've got 10 kids. I've got 4 kids in college right now. College is not a problem. Kids have lots of opportunities to obtain financial aid. There's lots of scholarships available, work-study programs. There's lots of ways to pay for college. Having your whole life turned upside down for sports scholarships really doesn't make any sense. And when it comes to college admissions with extracurricular activities, what colleges are looking for in extracurricular activities is not busyness. They're not looking to see how active you are or how many different activities you're involved in. What you're applying for admission to the school, you're probably identifying some goals, whether it's choosing a major, applying for a specific program, talking about what you'd like to do in your future. And the colleges are looking in your extracurricular activities for signs of some significant interest in the things you say that you're interested in. So for example, if you're applying to a college and you want to join the dance program, they're going to be looking for dancing experience. They're going to be looking to see whether you've gone to dance school, whether you've performed before on stage. To say I won the lead role in the Nutcracker for my ballet school and performed at Christmas in front of this huge crowd. That's a valuable extracurricular experience for a girl applying for a dance program in college, or to say I want to be a doctor, I want to go to medical school, and my extracurricular activity is that I was the backup fullback on the. No, that's got nothing to do with a medical career. They would much rather see that you were, volunteering in the hospital or spending time helping a local doctor in his office, getting into health and fitness, exercising, things like that, learning about fitness, training. Those are extracurricular activities that actually show some mature interest, some sustained interest in a certain field or a specialty. That's the kind of stuff they're looking for in extracurricular activities. They're looking for leadership. To say I was, a leader of a local political organization. I did this. I won this election. I was in charge of this and organized this. That's leadership skills. That's significant extracurricular activity and so on. They're not just looking for busyness. They're looking for virtue, for sustained interest in those things a student claims to be interested in the future. And they're looking for signs of promise, whether there are signs that the student will, in fact, be successful in the field he talks about getting into based on what he does during his school year. So extracurricular activities need to be purposeful and significant, not just multiplied in endless busyness. That's not what the purpose of extracurriculars should be. So anyway, I hope that's helpful. We don't have to choose between physical fitness and athletic activity and idleness. We shouldn't put our kids in that position where they don't have anything to do. It takes investment from parents. It takes example and modeling good habits from parents. It takes effort to get the kids initiated into certain activities. We've got to provide the space. We've got to provide the equipment and supplies. Sometimes we've got to get the kids started, give them some training. But once we can get them, off the training wheels and they start to take it up for themselves, if we can successfully introduce them to fitness and exercise, it's something that they can give all of their spare time to and take with them into adult life. And I think that's what's most helpful. So I hope that's helpful. If there are any specific questions or issues you'd like to talk about, I'd be happy to answer those questions. Just send them to me. My email is wcm@classicalliberalarts.com. I'd be happy to get into those practical details. And I know there are controversial issues. There are issues of modesty and the culture of maybe a local gym and things like that. There are options. Like for us, there are weightlifting gyms in the area where I think the culture is a little raunchy. And then there's like for us, we have a county health center. It's called the Monroe Aquatics and Fitness Center. It's more of a community, state-funded place that's totally different. It's family friendly. It's very well supervised, strict rules, limited membership, things like that. So there's some prudence needed in choosing the where and how to do these things. But I think you always have to. One last principle: when you consider these things, homeschool families sometimes become too idealistic, and the decisions that they make are not reasonable. They're not practical and reasonable. For example, often when we choose to do something, we've got to move away from, let's say, the perfect conditions, right? We've got to compromise a little bit in order to obtain one benefit. We may need to move away from our ideal position, and some parents will compare the ideal to this compromise and say, no, we shouldn't do this because we have to. But the problem is that when our kids start to make decisions, their decisions may not be between that thing and the ideal. It may be between the ideal and something much worse. And so you get into this question of the golden mean. Maybe if you would compromise a little bit, and compromise doesn't mean to apostatize. Compromise means to pursue some end in a patient way by accepting, an intermediary step. That's what compromise is. So if I can't get if my kid's not interested in praying 24 hours a day, I don't just leave him to pray 0 hours a day. I try to find a compromise because it's better for him to pray a little than to not pray at all. Whereas many homeschool families go into Christian life with this sort of, religious life or bust, all or nothing, and they end up with nothing. They end up with the busted kids because they're not willing to compromise. So understanding that though some of these activities, some of these extracurricular options may require us to move away from an ideal, rather than compare that to the ideal, which may really not be a sustainable situation. We need to consider how compromising and establishing a good option for the kids may prevent their interest in a worse option. And that's another topic, but that's an important principle. I always catch homeschool parents and other Christians always comparing the ideal situation with sort of an option that's available. And I think that's a foolish comparison. That's really not the comparison. The comparison is really the ideal situation and a much worse situation if the kids are just left to themselves or left to be influenced by secular society, be introduced to health and fitness by immodest gym culture. I don't want that. I would rather introduce them to a balanced health and fitness culture in a good way, even if that means coming away from our Christian culture a little bit to establish something that's good. And those of you who are practical will understand what I'm talking about. So anyway, I hope that's helpful. If you've got any questions, get in touch and let me know what your experiences have been. If you've been involved in things, I know one Catholic family near us that was heavily into swimming. They had all their kids in competitive swimming, and the kids went on to go to the military academies and things like that. And I'm pretty sure that was a good experience for them. If you've had good experiences in certain things that you don't think fall into these troublesome issues where you're spending all of this time and money and energy on these skill activities that are useless once these scholastic sports ends, if you've found some other good solutions, I'd like to hear what you've got to say. So get in touch, and like I said, I hope that's helpful. Just trying to deal with some of these issues and help other parents think through them based on my own experience. And it's an important issue, one we've got to deal with, because we've got to give our kids positive things to do. We can't just no them to death. We've got to give them some things we say yes to, and that requires us to spend some money, spend some time, model things for them, help them to be introduced to these things, and it's an important topic. So I hope that's helpful. God bless.